Welcome to the Big Apple Film Festival distribution panel. I'm your host, Lavindra Gill, and I'm excited to welcome Rashaad Ernesto Green to the panel today. Rashaad, just give us a little bit of background on you so everyone knows, a little bit about your journey.
Sure. I started out as an actor a long time ago. Let's just keep it like that. And
well, I got some white here, so I've been at it longer than you have. So yeah.
But yeah, I came out in the industry at a time when the landscape didn't look as inviting as it did now for young Black actors or young Black and brown actors. And so I decided to go back to film school and tell the stories that I wanted to see on screen. And I went back to NYU, which is where I also went to grad acting school, and came out in 2011 with my first feature film called Gun Hill Road, which is about a Puerto Rican Dominican family in the Bronx who's dealing with a child who's transgender. After that,
that's the Esai Morales one, right?
Esai Morales and Judy Reyes were in that, yes. And it was at Sundance, and that opened a lot of doors, especially into television, which is where I stepped into for about 6 or 7 years. And then that led me to my second feature film called Premature. That was also at Sundance, about a young couple in Harlem, a young woman who's like navigating through her first big love of her life the summer before she goes to college. And this is a couple of years later, and here we are.
Well, I think most of the people that are going to be on this panel or listening are people that are at that stage where they're either about to make something or they just have made something. So I would love to go back and, dig a little deeper into that aspect of your journey. Because, I went to film school, graduated. I knew everything there was to know about an idea to a film. But that's like a third of the process. There's this whole fundraising and development and, process that doesn't really exist in film school other than, a few, what do you want to make kind of things. And then there's a second aspect or third aspect, I guess you'll say, once the film is done, you've got a list of deliverables, you got to get distribution, you've got to get exhibition. And now it seems like every day there's a new market. Now there's AVOD, which didn't exist a few years ago. And, pay-per-view wasn't what it used to be. It is different than it used to be. It's everywhere, where it was very specific and a lot more. And, the theatrical windows are smaller. You have day and date releases. So as a filmmaker, how do you go from getting your first film? Did you just apply to Sundance and it got in and your career launched, or what was that process? And even take it further back, how did you decide on that first film?
I guess when I went to film school, I guess I had the advantage of having been through graduate school before, and like knowing the grind and hustle of an actor's life, which was not very pretty, but I was willing to basically do whatever it took to get myself in front of casting directors and producers or whatever it had. So when I went back to graduate school, I was a little more experienced and willing to do, the grind. I didn't have to learn the grind necessarily from scratch. Of course, it was in a different medium, but I had that sort of engine behind me. I knew that grad school was for a purpose. It wasn't just to, sit back and, passively learn. It was, yes, of course, to learn, the tools of the craft, but also to network and put yourself out there. I think a lot of times kids who go to film school kind of think they have the luxury to wait and perfect the films. And I'm not saying that that's not, that there aren't pros to that. Of course, you want to put your best foot out there, but a lot of kids wait and for a couple of years when they're working just on a short film, if that's where you want to stay, of course that's great. But in order to make a career and work in television, or if you want to get into feature films, the short can be a useful tool or calling card in order to make that feature. Mm-hmm. So I made a number of short films when I was in film school, and each one was, I attended the film festivals, I shook hands, I met people, and all an effort to eventually get that first feature off the ground. But I had done probably 7 or 8 shorts by the time I tried my hand at the feature. This was now after third year was already finished, and we had our 2 thesis years in order to complete our thesis. And we have the option of making a short or a feature for our thesis film at the time. And I took the option to make the feature because I felt like I had already done enough shorts. They did what they were supposed to do, and I was pleased with them, and I wanted to try something new. And so again, I was a little bit older, having already gone to grad school before, and I figured let me take a crack at it. So I wrote the feature, or at least the first draft, while I was still in school, and during those 2 thesis years, I revised it. I applied to all the labs. I applied to, for grants, and I succeeded in getting a couple of grants to help me with development. But at that point, I was willing to make that feature for the money that I had at my disposal. So whether that was, money that I won from the short film festival circuit, or the grants combined, plus credit card, plus student loans, I was gonna cobble together as much money as I needed to make a very low budget feature, which I figured might be somewhere in the vicinity of $50,000, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I was willing to do that. And there was a producer friend of mine who I had actually met when I was an actor, acting in New York theater, who had become a film producer, or at least started to dabble in film producing after we acted in a show together. And I went back to film school after I acted in that show as well. So we were both, I was learning the craft of filmmaking, and he went to producing, and he invited me out to lunch one day, and I didn't know what it was for. I didn't know if he was going to pitch me a project, but because I already had my feature like sort of in my back pocket. Mm-hmm. He was asking me, what was I going to do next? And I guess that sort of sprang out of my use of social media at the time. I was really active on Facebook with the short films, especially. Whenever they would get into a film festival or win some type of award, I was, using the platform to keep people abreast and keep people in the loop. And I guess because of that momentum, he then reached out. So he just asked me what I had going on next. I told him a little bit about the film that I planned to make. And he said, great, I want to help you out with that. And that was, it wasn't the only conversation, but that was the major portion of raising the financing for my first feature film. And I think that he, obviously he liked the story. We had a bit of a relationship coming from the theater world, but he also saw that I had a track record, and he also saw that I was going to make that film regardless of whether he came into the picture or not. Yeah. That was kind of like a moving train that he had to like jump on in case he wanted to, make it to the station in time. If I had come to him, I think with the same proposal, hey, I have this film, I don't know if I'm ever going to get it made, I don't know, how much it's going to cost, et cetera, et cetera. He may not have been so keen on investing in this film, but because I was going to make it regardless, I think he probably felt, okay, I have to get in now, or else I'm not gonna be able to help make this film. So
let me interject real quick.
Yep.
In my minor journey, I went back and I asked investors in my very first feature, which was a while ago, why the hell would you invest in my like, I had no track record, I had no short films, I had none of that stuff. They're like, after we spoke to you, I remember talking to my wife and I said to her, that kid, if he has to flick a frame 24 times on a still camera per second himself, that kid's going to make a movie. And it was that same thing. It's wonderful to hear that's the exact same thing. It's that drive from within you that actually attracts all these other people to come be a part of that journey.
Sure. Yes. Drive and passion are something that people pick up on, of course. And now looking back on it, I also, investors don't always invest in films in order to turn a profit, at least not a financial profit, right? Just as is the same reason why filmmakers make films. It's not always to just, to make money. Like, that's not why we got into this thing. We could have been investment bankers, right? But there, everyone has their own reason, and I guess you have to figure out why this person might be interested in investing if it's not a guaranteed financial upside, which it never is, right? And being a budding producer, perhaps, looking at a track record, the likelihood of this film getting into Sundance or a premiere festival was probably a risk he was willing to take. He had already done a film that had been at Sundance, and I think at the time maybe he was still looking to act in films as well. So whatever the incentive, I think you should probably try to figure out where this potential investor might be coming from. And yeah, lucky for me, he was willing to invest in somebody who was hungry, and it has never been as easy since. That was it was serendipitous, and I knew, going back into it, that was kind of a fluke, and I would probably never get another shot like that. And so I was, I wasn't like, oh, this is how it happens all of the time. No, I had already heard, the horror stories, which is why I personally am very impatient person. So if I can cobble together $5 to make a film, I'm gonna do it. And so if an investor is willing to come on board, I welcome them, but if they're not, I try to find, whatever resources I can, or at my disposal to make the thing happen, regardless of whether someone's going to invest in it or not. But that also means, writing to a specific budget level too. If your first feature is going to be a $20 million film, you may never get the shot that somebody who's can write something that might cost $70,000 or $80,000 to make. They might have a better shot. And of course, you can have the $20 million film in your back pocket. That could be next. Right. But you in order to get to the $20 million film, and that's not to say that people don't get that shot. If the script is amazing and you get it in the right hands, yeah, you might. But you may want to put your energy into a script that can be made at a significantly lower budget level.
Right. Can I ask you what your budget ended up being on that film?
It was under $1 million. Yeah, it was under $1 million. So it wasn't much, but yeah, we got it done.
No,
It was hard, and we running around New York without air conditioning, and without trailers, or with a very brand spanking new crew who was willing to work for pennies. But we had a good time here and there, and we got it done.
all right. We got a couple of questions here for you. We often hear that indie dramas and romance without big name cast, and even with, are not easy to sell to buyers and distributors. Do you have advice for those of us who want to make them anyway, and that would help them surmount that challenge?
To make dramas without big name casts?
Dramas or romance with or without big name cast, because we've talked to a lot of distributors the last couple of days, and every one of them says dramas are the hardest sell right now. It's so hard to sell them, especially without any stars in them. Genre pieces are a lot more popular. It's easier to categorize that. A horror movie, a musical or a sports movie is a lot easier to find an audience, because right now, it's the big blue sea, and you're dropping one drop as your film in the ocean. It's got to find an audience. So you'd rather be in a lake or a pond where you have a much more viable chance of finding an audience. So any advice that would help surmount that, because your film was an indie drama.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, my answer was probably twofold, because yes, dramas are hard to sell, and if you don't have any name cast, it will be even harder. But I would never ever suggest you don't write your drama, or you don't try to make your drama if that's a story that you need to tell. I 100% support unique voices, and if you have a story to tell, then you should do everything in your power to tell it. That being said, of course, this is a business, and if you believe in your script and feel like there's somebody that has maybe a face or a name that can or would be attracted to your film, or your script or your project, and you might be able to get it into their hands, then having that person in your film validates it in such a, can validate it to such a degree that a distributor might want to take a chance on it. Of course, an independent drama with kids right out of acting school might not be as attractive as an independent drama with who's the young lady from Euphoria,
Zendaya.
Right?
Yeah.
Now if she agrees, if you have some sort of connection, or you're able to get her, agent or manager somehow comes across the script and says, wow, this would be great, and she actually has a couple of months off next year or whatever, that is a gamble that you might want to take. Now, if you're willing to make your film without anybody who has a face or a name regardless, then why not take the swing? Is my suggestion. Why not take the swing anyway? That doesn't necessarily mean you have to wait 5-6 months for an answer. But once you have, let's say, a little bit of seed money in place, I would say your next step should be to grab a casting director. Because you calling up agents and you calling up managers, somebody might ignore your call because they've never heard of you. But if you can afford a casting director, and let's say it's, maybe it's not, the top of the line, but maybe it's somebody who has a connection, or they're trying to build up their resume. You might be able to get away with a casting director for, let's say, under $10,000. Maybe it's $5,000. That you can hold them for, and then they wind up getting the other 5 later or something. You can always work out deals with people. And let's say that they have a connection to Zendaya's manager or agent and can get it into their hands. and you say, this film is going to go in August, whether she's available or not, take a look at the script. You have, a week and a half, 2 weeks to respond. And you'll probably not hear from them,
Right.
probably won't. But what if you do? What if they say, oh, interesting,
Right.
or they worked with that casting director before, so they're going to give it a read. And Zendaya, signs up to your signs onto your project. Now all of a sudden, that drama has become, the darling of a festival, and there's a distribution war for your film, and
Right.
it's the same exact material.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's not always the material. Obviously, some material can be much more attractive if you have a specific cast in it. Your independent drama starring Brad Pitt would be obviously very attractive, and you never know. So take the big swing, but still be willing to cast non-stars in it, which I've always been willing to do, because there are wonderful actors and performers out here who, might not have a name or a face, or this is their first film, but they're fantastic. And so the film, still has a chance of being decent, even with your non-star cast. Of course, yeah, then you run the risk, you run a greater risk of it, not being picked up or not being distributed. But you never know if it's one of those, squeakers, or it's a festival darling, or you can get some good press on it. Then it might not compete with Wakanda Forever at the box office, but maybe it could be picked up and distributed in a niche market, or this it could be a calling card for a series you want to develop, or another feature you want to develop. I would always take the shot, regardless of whether you can get cast or not.
Good advice, sir. Another question. Do you have any stories to share about your marketing and distribution goals with Premature and how things went with it?
Well, Premature was a little funky because it came out during the pandemic, like right when the pandemic had started. So we had a theatrical window all set, and it was like, I want to say February 2020. And it kind of evaporated as the pandemic got worse and worse. So our theatrical window was kind of killed. But yeah, it did well on VOD. We released, it was like the day and date. It played at the same time it came out in theaters. It was available on to rent on video. And then it also eventually came onto Hulu, and we tried to keep people aware of its status as we went along. But we kind of had to roll with the punches of the pandemic as it occurred.
No, that's tough timing. Yeah. Can you tell me about how that project came together?
Well, I had done a short film called Premature when I was in NYU grad film school. And that was over 10 years ago now, with the same young woman cast as the lead in that film, about a young girl who gets pregnant in the South Bronx, and how she has to deal with it within her family and community. Fast forward, that young girl who was 14 at the time went to college and grad school and became a dear friend of mine, Zora. I had made several shorts since then, and the first feature, and then and some television. But we had always talked about the potential to collaborate again. She had never acted in anything before, and she had started to write plays of her own. I think that she had that she had a desire to write. So we figured during her last semester at grad school, I had written a couple of features that were going to take a little bit more money to actually get off the ground. And I figured, why not take a stab at something that I could potentially greenlight on my own if push came to shove. I didn't know what that would be, but I figured I could write at a certain budget level. And so Zora was home after, during her winter break before her last year at grad school in San Diego. And we got into the room and said, okay, we have a month. Why don't we write something that we can make eventually? And so that's how it started. So we said, like, sort of like at the end of this month, we'll have a draft of a script starring you, and I'll direct it, and and the idea is that we'll premiere it at the Sundance Next competition either next year or worst comes to worst the following year. Okay, what do we want to write about? So we started throwing things out there, and thinking about like the status of like the state of current Black cinema, and what kind of stories we're attracted to or wanted to see on screen, and we settled on a love story, something that we can that we both obviously have experience with, and can pull from our experiences. And while we were crafting what that love story would be, obviously, a young woman in Harlem. Most of the film was shot right here in this room. Themes from the short film that I had made a decade prior kind of crept into the process, and we were, happy to include some of the themes and characters and world from that short film, and it became one happy blend, and the rest is history.
Can I get and don't ask him if you don't want to, how did the budget end up working on, and how did that film do for you distribution wise? Yeah, I think you touched on that already. Yeah, but
from Premature, that one, I knew that it might not be as easy to raise the financing as Gun Hill Road was, just because, like I was aware that Gun Hill Road was a bit of a fluke, and at this point I had a little bit of money in the bank from directing television episodes, and I figure if I can keep the budget low enough, meaning if I can make a feature film mainly about 2 or 3 characters in a room, or just walking around Harlem, I might be able to green light it myself. So once we had a workable script, which I would say took probably, I know we said we'd have a draft at the end of the month, but it really took 1.5 years. So once we took that out to the industry, we took meetings with my producer Joy Gans, and I took meetings with everybody who responded to the script, and there were a number, and they really liked it, et cetera, but nobody lined up to write a check. There were those who said, we could probably get a check eventually, but it would probably take us another 5-6 months. And I was impatient. I didn't want to wait. I wanted to make the film as soon as possible. And so I decided to just greenlight it myself.
Nice. Okay. I resemble that remark. My producer Andy and I greenlit a film last summer that we're finishing up post on. So yeah, sometimes you just gotta scratch that itch, you know what I'm saying? But that movie has gone on to do some good stuff for you. Was it nominated for Independent Spirit Award?
It was, yes. Yes.
Congratulations for that.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank
that's
you so much.
amazing. And so now when you're developing films, now you've had someone help fund it, you fund it yourself. Now are you targeting larger films? What is your process now?
Right now, it's like you said, that the premature definitely opened some doors, and um, I had more scripts come across my desk to consider. And I'm attached to several projects right now at different stages. And it's funny how even when you're working on projects that might be at a bigger budget level or at a studio, it's still the same thing. You're kind of waiting around for somebody to green light it, and a lot of the steps are similar. So yeah, it's the part that I don't always, I don't always love waiting, so I'm tested in that regard. My patience is tested, but there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and hopefully the idea is that with more collaborators on board, we'll create something that that we can all be proud of.
Okay. Well, what is your advice to people that, I guess were in the same spots where you were, where you wanted to make a movie and, you're, I guess, not necessarily struggling trying to raise money, just impatient and don't want to make it happen. Because it sounds like the last film, Premature, you wrote with a specific budget in mind, with specific locations and things that you had available to you. Do you think that helped force your creativity to maximize those things, or can you talk about that process a little bit and what resulted in being such an effective film?
I would say if you were going to take that path, you probably want to take it, if you don't have a lot of other responsibilities. Like I was married in the past, but I'm not married anymore, and I don't have any children. So if taking a big financial risk isn't going to necessarily like upend my life, or the safety or stability of my family. So if you're able to take care of yourself, and the risk you're willing to take is not going to kill you or destroy your life.
It's pretty drastic there.
I mean, obviously, people will sleep in their car, and like that I'm not willing. I'm not willing to do. You know what I mean? I'm not willing to put my house, if I had one, which I don't. You know what I mean? I've always kept a very low overhead, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm able to make certain, just because I still live like a student. I live in a very affordable tiny studio in New York, and have since grad school. So because of that, and I don't own a car, I take the subway. I've been able to support myself. If you're going to risk that, and for your art, and you're going to go hungry, it really depends on your priorities. I'm not willing to take that risk, but I am willing to take risks. So long as I'm not going to go hungry, and so long as I can continue to pay for my overhead, then what am I like? The question becomes like, what can you lose, and can you afford to lose it? If this doesn't make a penny, will you still be okay? And for me, the gambles that I've taken have paid off significantly, but that's not to say that they would every time. I've been very, very blessed and very, very, very lucky. I've been willing to invest in myself when others might not be, as motivated to do so. Sometimes you have to invest in yourself before others are willing to. And this happened. This has happened on both of my feature films thus far. But it might not have. It might not have. And I still think that I probably would have regretted not taking this chance, even if no one lined up to help me out. Because if I didn't take the chance, I wouldn't have made the film.
Right.
And without children, those projects become my children, right? I can now talk about my two kids, Gun Hill Road and Premature. Like, I can talk about them. And if I didn't raise them, if I didn't take the shot, if I didn't make them, then I wouldn't be talking to you. Right. What I mean? So
clearly this is the pinnacle of your career talking to me. Not at all. So let me ask you another question.
Yeah, sorry if that was long-winded and
no worries,
that directly answered your question.
No, it was fantastic, and it's true. My wife is listed as an executive producer on all my films because the first time I made a film, we took out a second mortgage and we maxed the credit cards out and we did all that crazy stuff. So
okay, so yeah, you went all the way.
Yeah. So let's talk about you as a filmmaker and navigating distribution and exhibition and all that, because they don't teach that in film school. So, did your producer handle all that? Were you heavily involved in it? What made you decide to go with the companies you went with? What kind of deals are out there for filmmakers who's going to make a low budget film with no stars in it?
I would say the first time around, we had a few more faces that were recognizable. Isai Morales and Judy Reyes. This time around, because I was very impatient, I decided to just, go with friends and, very, very talented people who had been on Broadway and stuff like that, but no one who necessarily had, a name or a face, So, so this time around, it was perhaps a little bit more difficult. There were a couple of companies that were interested in distributing. And because I had some production companies that came on once we were in post, they also weighed in on that decision. They had invested in the film, and so they had an opinion about which way we should go. And we wound up going with IFC because they're a credible distributor. When I saw the first cut of the film, it felt like an IFC film. Like my editor and I we were like, I could see this at the IFC Center. Like, it felt like that kind of film. And then we were right, they're not the biggest, but they are reputable. Mm-hmm. And, they supplied the poster options and cuts of the trailer, and I was very involved in the direction of those two promotional materials, and they kept me abreast at every stage about what their intentions were and how to market, and were willing to listen to suggestions we had, and yeah, they were a great partner, especially for a film that I made in my bedroom. It was wonderful to have somebody who had such experience and credibility within the industry, kind of help us navigate those waters.
Okay, and having gone through this twice with independent films, are there any anything you would have done differently? Or are you happy with how everything worked out for your projects?
I think, when you're wearing so many hats, you don't necessarily know like how time consuming that can be, especially, after the film is in the can. You think, like once you make the film, like that was the hard part. But in many ways, it's like you just signed up for another job, where on the B side of making a film, it can take a year and a half to get all the deliverables together and all of those things. So, or whether you're running around the festivals or whatever have you, it's a lot. It's a lot to handle. And if I could do it over again, I think I would try to have other people be more responsible in delivering all of those things. Because I mean, and I had partners, but I think, if I had to do it again, I wouldn't take as much of the brunt of delivering all those things, because it was it can be really stress inducing. And yeah.
Okay. And when you say that, you mean like the list of deliverables and post, or what do you mean by take the brunt of those things?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I was wearing a producer hat as well, and I don't know that I'm as attracted to producing as I am to the creative side of it. But when you self-invest and it's your money on the line, like you want everything to be done a certain way, and so I was wearing many hats, and I had to be responsible for things that I was just learning, for the first time, signing off on E&O insurance, and getting the song rights to this song on Pond 5, like we're talking about the
minutia.
The minutia.
Right. Yeah.
It's a little dirty in the details, and extremely time consuming, and the amount of emails, and and I also kind of became like the financial backstop first. Like, you don't know how much these things are going to cost either. And yeah, it took some time and energy, and I had to, kind of get into a very zen place in order to stay sane.
On my first feature, I called it directing between the cracks, because I was a producer, action, I'm directing, cut, and now I'm producing again, and that's how it felt. And it was a big struggle, because I didn't surround myself with a super experienced team, and we were just kind of go. And on the second film, I had a lot better group, but I was still, as you say, the backstop. The buck kind of stopped with me on all these decisions. And the one we did last year, I hired 2 producers, and I felt like I got to play in a bubble, and it was a much more enjoyable experience for me. I still have, I'm a producer on it, and I still had to deal with stuff, but nowhere near as much as in the past. So I think that's a valuable thing, because the beauty and horror of filmmaking is you can't do it alone.
That's right.
And it's beautiful because you get to collaborate, and you'll have these people that'll make things so much better for you. And sometimes it's horrible, because there's some people that'll just make it much more difficult than it needs to be. And you know what I mean? You've got to kind of find that balance of who you work with and who you don't. So no, I would not argue with you at all on that. I think finding people to handle certain things and not having to deal with it makes life, the process, significantly more enjoyable, because it's hard.
Right.
It's a war. You're going to war every time you're making a movie. I applaud bad movies, because I'm like, they got made, man. I know how hard that is. And then if you see a good movie, that's even like a double miracle or a triple miracle. So any last words of advice? Because our cutoff time's in about 5 minutes for our attendees who are making their films or about to make their films. What would you like to leave them with?
If you have a story to tell, do whatever you need to do to make it. Don't listen to the naysayers, but also, if you can, have readings of your material and, listen to the feedback and place as much time and energy into the pre-production and the development of the script, because that's the portion that's going to cost you the least. If afterwards, and once you're in production, and then and your purse is open, is when you start seeing dollars fly out the window. And if there's a scene that could have been cut, or you were sort of 50-50, I don't know if I need it or not, and now you're filming something that's going to cost you $20,000, and it winds up on the cutting room floor for whatever reason, you're going to be kicking yourself because you could have cut it when your professor from school said, I don't know if you need that scene. So try to give yourself a little bit of a litmus test, and open the floor to people who you trust, to save you some pain on the B side. But yeah, don't there are going to be a whole bunch of people who don't agree with you taking a risk on yourself, whether that's your best friends or your parents or your companions. And if you believe that you have something special, or it's simply a story that you need to tell, then don't stop at anything to tell it. Of course, take the swings at the for cast that might help you sell the film. Take the swings at production companies who might who may be able to help get your film off the ground, or the grants or the labs. But if push comes to shove and you still don't have the money after taking all of those swings, then cobble it together. Go to work for a year or two, do what you need to do, and get it made.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Last quick question. A couple people are asking, do you have a production company to find material outside of your own creative work on? Is there a place that people can reach out to you for advice or contact? Are you comfortable with sharing?
Oh, sure. My agent at WME, his name is Nick Hoagland. Is able to receive anything on my behalf. If there's anything you guys want me to consider, Nick Hoagland at WME. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you all make art, and I want to support you in that.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rashaad. We really appreciate you. We know you're a busy man, and really enjoyed your candor and your your deep answers to these questions. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Have a great one. Thank you. Bye-bye.